On today's morning show from WRCO, we have attorney Michael Windle in here, attorney at Abt Swain Law, and also the attorney for the City of Richland Center. See, back in our studios, you were here a while ago, Michael, but good to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll note I'm also the attorney for the county and a number of municipalities throughout Richland.
Yeah, we read your name a lot in some of the board minutes and whatnot. So your second visit here, but maybe you could kind of refresh our memories. You're not from Wisconsin originally, are you?
That's correct. I was born just outside of Philadelphia, lived in Philly until I was about 3, moved down to Newark, Delaware, which is like Madison but smaller. It's the campus of the University of Delaware and the town surrounding it. Moved out here in 2013 with my now ex. And then after graduating law school, my fiance works in Madison. Our main office is in Westby. We needed somewhere kind of in between the two. And Panorama has air conditioning, so that was apparently the selling point required. And so we ended up here, and obviously, you know, I don't need to tell people that once you're here, you fall in love with the place. And then when the opening came up for Corporation Counsel, I was like, I know somebody who knows municipal law and lives here, so we were fortunate enough to get that contract. And then the mayor, when Attorney McGow returned to his home state, kind of headhunted me, for lack of a better term, and said, you know, I'd like you to represent the city as well. And I've been fortunate enough to do that as well.
How long have you been representing?
2 years now for the city and 5 years for the county, I want to say.
I know when you first got into law, you probably didn't know exactly which direction you would go, but it's kind of like you never get bored because you represent lots of different things, don't you?
Yeah, so I actually went to law school to be a prosecutor, and one of the things that I learned very quickly is that it is very rare for someone to come out of law school practicing in the area that they went into law school for. So when I first came out of law school, we were a general practice firm. So I did divorces and real estate disputes, contracts and commercial leases. But additionally, we were the city attorney for the city of Westby and corporation counsel for Vernon County. I have a history. I was a drug and alcohol counselor before I went to law school. And so I did a lot of work in the guardianships, involuntary commitments, the mental health area of law, and found I had a real passion and aptitude for that. And then once the Richland contract came up, I kind of diversified in municipal representation. It is a lot. I've had conversations with attorneys who've practiced 20 years more than me, and their words have not done half as much in terms of the areas of law that I've needed to figure out.
I understand sometimes, I mean, you have to sit down and just have some light reading, like a 1,000-page document. I mean, that's got to be maddening to go through that, isn't it?
I suppose it could be for some people. It kind of is perfectly in line with my strengths. Honestly, the idea of specializing in an area of law does not appeal to me. I couldn't imagine coming in and doing the same thing every day. I love the challenge that comes with municipal representation of never knowing what it is that I'm going to have to deal with in a given day. And then as well, you know, it's a public office, so it's not just a matter of being able to know and advise on the law. There's also, you know, public interactions, as we're doing here today, but also in meetings and things like that. And just being able to translate the legalese into language that a diversity of people can understand. So I'm not just having a one-on-one conversation with a client. I've got to be sure that the entire board understands my advice, or the entire council understands my advice, or in certain situations that the community understands what I'm trying to convey.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason you're here, you know, transparency, and I think that's very important, don't you?
Yeah, so, you know, the one thing that TV gets right about the law is attorney-client privilege, and so there's vast areas of my job that I'm simply not able to talk about. But I became a lawyer because I love the law. I think it's fascinating. I appreciate the scholarly aspects of it in addition to the applications. I certainly love when I can use the skills and training that I've worked so hard for to help people. But I also know that it is challenging if you're not someone who does it for a living to sometimes make sense of everything. And I I would say I'm a terrible teacher. However, I would love to be able to offer what I can in terms of education to the community. I think that that's consistent with, my roles representing municipalities. I can't discuss, specific topics necessarily. However, general legal principles, I think it would be helpful for some people to have access to me in order to explain those and just kind of answer general legal questions.
Sure. Our plan was to open up the phone line, so if somebody does have a question relating to law for Michael today, you'd be answered off the air at 647-4155. But feel free to submit a question to us, and we'll put it on the air. You had a chance, Michael, to be a part of the Wisconsin Supreme Court visit yesterday, and you had a chance to sit in with that, and tell us what that was like.
Yeah, so the Wisconsin Supreme Court has a program called Justice on Wheels, and I love that I've gotten to say this fact more often in the last, couple weeks than I have in my entire life. But the term circuit court, so what we have here in Richland is a circuit court, that term derives from the practice of judges literally mounting up and riding a circuit of various municipalities and hearing cases throughout that circuit. And so it's kind of a callback to that tradition where judges would be transient, they'd go out and hear a case and then move on to the next town or village. And because our recently retired Chief Justice, Ann Walsh Bradley, is a proud Richland Center resident, they elected to hold the event here. They held oral arguments for two different cases, one regarding the application of an immunity statute passed during the COVID emergency, and whether or not it could prevent someone from bringing a claim for an unrelated medical treatment. The other regarded the application of the Miranda rights, the Miranda warnings, with which people are familiar. You have the right to remain silent, anything you say, can you, et cetera, as it applies to I don't want to use the term interrogation because that's kind of the root of the case, but a student was brought in for questioning by a school resource officer to an office in the school. And so the court was called upon to make a determination as to whether or not that met the standards where you would need to apply that warning or whether it was just kind of a conversation.
Okay. And then you had a chance afterwards to have a little bit of a face-to-face time with some of the folks that were here too, right?
Yeah. So the county bar put on a luncheon. The county bar president, Attorney Dominic Anderson, and Attorney Julie DeDune, who also spoke and introduced one of the cases during the event, put on a wonderful luncheon, and we got to have some face-to-face time with the justices. It can be a little nerve-wracking. Judge Sharp kind of described the arguments before the Supreme Court as the Super Bowl for lawyers, and it's an apt descriptor, and so it can be a little intimidating, basically, meeting the individuals who have achieved one of the highest offices that you can in my profession. But they're surprisingly friendly and inviting and approachable. It's also helpful to have those opportunities to realize that at the end of the day, they are people. And to have that interaction with them was just a great opportunity.
I think that, lawyers probably do get a bad rap in some ways. I mean, I think, and some of that may be thanks to TV and movies and things like that as well, right?
Despite my frequent jokes to the contrary, lawyers are also people. And you've got good ones, bad ones. I try to perform my responsibilities to the best of my ability and with integrity. Unfortunately, I cannot say that with of every attorney that I've ever met or interacted with or heard about. I will, freely offer that if you do have a grievance against an attorney, including myself, there is the Office of a Lawyer regulation through the state bar. You can just Google it. There's an online form, but it's an aspect of the Supreme Court of Wisconsin that regulates the practice of law and lawyers. We have a whole set of ethical standards and rules that apply to us that are kind of separate from the actual law. And so we can, have our licenses suspended, revoked, I think we recently had a former Supreme Court justice just had his law license suspended for, I believe, a few years for making untrue statements and claims.
Yeah, so you have to mind your P's and Q's as well, right?
Yeah, I would say that one of the key stereotypes with lawyers is, that they lie all the time. Where actually that being untruthful is one of the key things that will get you suspended or disbarred. So I would say that we don't lie as often as, well, some of us don't lie as often as we're made out to, but at the same time, we get really, really good at telling a very particular truth.
Very well. The ambulance, that's been a hot topic here in the city and in the county as well. And I know last night we talked a little bit about the meeting that you attended last night, but maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, so this is now a matter of public record. The county has put it out there. And some may recall during the discussions of my appointment as city attorney, I believe it was Alder Walters raised the question of whether or not I could in fact represent two bodies in the same area, and I was very upfront that I can. However, there may from time to time be conflict between the two entities, and at those times I would need to seek what's called informed consent. And unfortunately, with the way that the ambulance discussions have gone, I have determined that right now there is a conflict of interest between the county and the city. And so I've sent notice to the city council and the county board about this conflict of interest and offered my recusal. The Supreme Court rules that I mentioned previously don't allow me to represent two entities when their interests are adverse. And unfortunately, the base rule doesn't allow a distinction between, it's just the ambulance where they're having this dispute. There's a whole range of other issues where they're working together actively, unless I obtain the informed consent that I mentioned. And so there will be a written statement explaining the nature of the conflict and the potential harm that could be caused by my continued representation. And I've asked both the council and the board to vote as to whether or not they'd like me to continue my representation, and if so, they'd have to grant that informed consent.
Would they hire another attorney then? Is that
So the city has already retained another attorney for representing them in the ambulance. I believe the decision was made last night to consult with the WCA General Counsel, Atollas Law, the Wisconsin Counties Association General Counsel, Atollas Law, by the Executive and Finance Committee last night, just reviewing, my notice, the situation generally, and determining their best options, which is, of course, what I would have recommended. I had another meeting at the time, so I wasn't there for that discussion, but that's what I would have recommended had I been there.
Other towns and counties are going through kind of the same things right now, aren't they?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's to the point where our local representatives, Mark Leinen-Kurtz, Senator and Representative Mark Leinen-Kurtz, have pushed for a number of bills revising the way that municipalities are able to levy taxes to fund ambulance services. Now, in my review of the one that was recently signed into law, it does not appear that it is the one that I had mentioned in another previous meeting where it will allow an ambulance district to levy taxes directly to fund their services, but it does create an exemption for the expenditure restraint program, which is essentially a payment offered by the state to municipalities as long as they keep their spending in check, for lack of a better term, as long as they meet certain standards for ensuring that they're spending their money appropriately, they'll get some money back.
When you're representing family law, I mean, it's so much different than representing a city in terms of dollars and things like that you have to deal with.
Yes, I would say the biggest difference in family law is that there's little law actually involved in that. Ultimately, it comes down to there's a presumption of marital property. So basically, the couple is going to split their marital assets 50-50. And so what a lot of family law representation is negotiations between either the parties or the parties' attorneys as to who gets which 50%. representing municipalities, there's a whole spectrum of issues that I might have to address. Yes, the dollar amount is significant. I did not have any clients with multi-million dollar assets. And so, I try to be mindful of that, both in ensuring the advice that I give is appropriate and accurate and preserves as much of that as it can. I also try to limit my service, look for opportunities to what's called no charge. Basically, if I take a phone call that takes 3 minutes, I'm not going to bill for that. That's not worth the time it would take me to go into my billing program and enter that as a billing code. And so I try to be a good steward of the public assets that are entrusted to me through dint of being paid for my representation.
I would guess not all lawyers follow that, though. A 3-minute call might be a whole hour, right?
I am not aware of anyone who would go to that extreme. Typically, we bill to 6 minutes, so a tenth of an hour. But it would be very consistent across the practice for someone to, if they pick up the phone, that's at least a 6-minute billing entry. And it just, my dad restores classic cars. My mom was a registered nurse. I'm the first person in my family to obtain any kind of advanced degree. The only amount of money I care about having is enough. I pay my bills, I pay my taxes. I've got a nice little house and 2 annoying little dogs, and I can play my games, and that's really all I worry about. If I wanted to do this for the money, I'd go out to, work for Google or Amazon and review contracts for 6 figures an hour. And that just sounds awful, frankly.
Quite a difference representing in the rural area as opposed to a more populated area, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Some may recall from the last time I was with you, the reason I'm out here is the State Bar has what's called the Greater Wisconsin Initiative. Something like 80 to 90% of attorneys practicing in Wisconsin practice in either Madison or Milwaukee, and the Greater Wisconsin Initiative is basically get them out of the cities. And so where I grew up, Delaware, I kind of describe as Wisconsin, but take out all the space. And I had never been in a true small community, a rural community. And even in, the weekend that I spent in that bus tour, I just fell in love with it. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do because, there's often a lack of access to legal services in communities like ours. And it's just, there's so much that the law can impact that I knew it would be a place where I would be happy and where I could do some good and serve the community. And fortunately, that's what I found.
Submitted question from a caller today. Is there a benefit between a will and a trust fund? What's better?
So a trust is essentially okay. So first, surprise, lawyer, I'm going to read a disclaimer. I am not giving legal advice. I'm providing general legal knowledge based on my knowledge, experience, and training. And so I'm not answering any specific questions or providing any specific advice. With that being said, a trust is kind of a legal entity that is capable of owning, acquiring, and transferring property. And so what some people will do, there are 2 kinds of trusts. There's a revocable and an irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust means you no longer have control of the assets in that trust. A revocable trust is you appoint a trustee or trustees, typically yourself while you're alive and competent, someone else should you be deemed incompetent or pass away, and transfer assets to that. Now, those assets are under the control of the trust, and so with a revocable trust, it kind of the main advantage to the revocable trust is the assets in the trust, as long as the trust is written properly, can not necessarily will, but can avoid probate upon your passing. So essentially, the trust didn't die when you did. So as long as you can appoint a new trustee, or you spell out the distribution of the assets in the trust when you're creating it. That would be the advantage to that. An irrevocable trust is sometimes used for individuals with disabilities or as people are getting older, because the assets in an irrevocable trust, once you get past a certain look-back period, are not counted as assets available to you for the purposes of Medicaid, Medicare, other things like that. Theoretically, they can also shield you from certain creditors or judgments. And again, I would need to know more about a specific fact before I could say whether or not that would be the way to go. Will, on the other hand, pretty simple. When I die, this is what I want to happen. Typically, asset distribution. Jimmy gets the house, Bobby gets the car. The rest of it just gets divided evenly. With wills, the important part is to appoint a personal representative that you trust to administer the estate according to your wishes, and understand that the people that you may be leaving these assets to behave differently in front of you than they will when you are gone. Some of the saddest, hardest cases I've ever worked have been contested probates where, a parent or someone passes away and, frankly, the family just kind of implodes over the money. And, that I can't think of a more disrespectful way to treat the memory of a loved one than to turn them into a bank account that you fight over.
Mm-hmm. And it happens a lot. It tears families apart.
It does. It does. Sometimes there are resentments among individuals in the family that only get expressed once someone has passed away. Other times there are the individual with the assets uses that as a means to, kind of control the behaviors of those who would wish to be beneficiaries of those assets. Which, tying back to my earlier point, is why I just don't like money. I've seen what it does to people, and it's generally not a good thing.
It is different when someone dies, though. You appoint somebody while you're living, but that does change lots of times when you die, doesn't it?
Depending on how long. So, for example, I'm on the second revision of my will at age 38. Because, again, I was married when I wrote my first one, revised it from there. But, if I don't change my will, hopefully I live a long enough life that whomever I've named as my personal representative may pass on before me. And so it's important not only if you have estate planning documents in place, you need to keep them up to date, or if you, as you're writing them, I'll often ask for a successor personal representative and possibly even to a third degree. Just to also put it out there, as regards estate planning. So the will is what happens when you die. There are also durable power of attorneys for finances, which govern your financial assets should you be deemed incompetent of making your own decisions. And then there's powers of attorney for healthcare, which does the same thing for healthcare decisions.
Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. Again, if you'd like to submit a question, 647-4155 for attorney Michael Windle. We'll be back with more here on The Morning Show after these words. Our guest is attorney Michael Windle, represents the city of Richland Center in the county, and we are glad to have him in here for his expertise today. And we got a call about a quiz that we had on a couple of weeks ago, the Andy Griffith Show, about Aunt Bee's specialty. What was her specialty was the question. What would you guess her specialty is, Michael?
I would have to assume some kind of pie.
Exactly, right. The answer that day was pickles, which was... in the episode, they called them kerosene pickles. So the caller said, ask a lawyer. I mean, what do you think? Should I pursue this further, that I was wronged that day?
Well, it actually raises an interesting point about the practice of law, where lawyers tend to think of themselves as the smartest person in the room, and oftentimes others think of us as the smartest person in the room. So Andy Griffith Show was a little bit before my time and not one of the programs that I caught up on at Nick at Night. So, Bewitched, I Dream a Genie, we can have conversations there.
Sure.
But, Andy Griffiths was not something that I caught up on. So just the name of the character, deriving it from context. That's how I reached the conclusion about pi. And as silly as it seems, that's basically what I do in legal analysis. I take a certain set of facts. I don't always have all of them available to me. I apply both knowledge that I've gained over the course of my life and knowledge that I've obtained through the course of my education and try and reach a conclusion based on that. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. Have we determined what the answer actually is? Because kerosene pickles does not sound particularly appetizing. So if it does end up being some kind of pie, then I'll feel pretty good about myself.
In the trial against Henry Bray, we'll have to pursue that a little bit further. But was there a TV show or a movie when you were growing up? I mean, how accurate are some of these law TV shows?
So as I mentioned, I wanted to go to school to be a prosecutor. I was specifically inspired by Jack McCoy from Law and Order.
Oh, yeah.
It's television. It's entertainment. At the end of the day, there are aspects that people get right and a lot more aspects that people get wrong. I had an evidence professor in law school who said that if people are actually interested in the way a courtroom works in reality, there are two movies they can watch. And unfortunately, I cannot for the life of me remember the first one, but it was a Jimmy Stewart movie, black and white, where he plays an attorney.
Is it Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, maybe? Or is that...
Could be.
Okay.
But the other one, which people tend to be far more familiar with, is actually My Cousin Vinny. And I'll point specifically to the scene where the arrogant Southern lawyer attempts to argue the expertise of Vinny's, I believe it's his girlfriend, and her knowledge of automotives. And he says, what's the torque ratio of a 1965, blah, blah, blah. And she schools him, absolutely. And it's a very funny scene. It shows him getting his comeuppance, but it's actually exactly what you would do in what's called a Daubert examination. So Daubert is the case that set the standard for what qualifies as an expert witness. And, if you call someone who's ostensibly a witness, the opposing counsel gets the opportunity to disprove that they're an expert. And so one of the lines, they're specifically talking about the tire treads that were found on the crime scene. And the Southern lawyer, challenges her expertise as a tire tread expert. And Vinny says, I'm not calling her as a tire tread expert, a general automotive knowledge expert. And so that is... again, maybe played up a little bit for the entertainment value, but at its core, a completely accurate depiction of what might actually go on in a courtroom.
To Kill a Mockingbird is another one from the book and the movie. Yeah.
That could work.
Takes place in a courtroom. Absolutely. It was in the news today about the assassin of Charlie Kirk. I don't know if you heard that they're wanting him to appear in plain clothes and not in prison clothes.
Yeah, so that actually has a legal basis. It's what's called prejudicial. And so basically you cannot force someone to present in a way that would potentially influence a jury to think of them one way or another. One trick, and I don't do criminal law, so I'm happy to let this slip, is if you are a defense attorney, you will often have your defendant appear in glasses. Because it changes the perceptions of individuals when they're wearing glasses. So
really? If
you go and look through, there's been some entertainers in the headlines recently facing, criminal charges or court time. And if you look, you can go through, 30 years of them being in the spotlight, never appeared in a pair of glasses in their entire life. All of a sudden they're sitting at counsel table and they've got the glasses on. And that is... I can't say with absolute certainty in every case, but generally speaking, that is something that they consider. There's actually an entire industry in some larger communities that are basically consultants on jury selection. So voir dire, which is the Latin term for jury selection, is a key component in any jury trial. Each side gets a certain number of just kind of automatic disqualifications, and then there are grounds to disqualify someone. So, for example, I have a cousin who's a police officer. And so I was asked if that would cause me to view the statements made by law enforcement more favorably than other people. And it wouldn't in my case, but that's the sort of thing that you look to tease out in the voir dire process. So, it would all depend on the facts of the case that you're trying to argue, but you'd want people who and it does somewhat rely on maybe stereotyping or drawing unfair conclusions, but you want to try and find individuals who are going to be sympathetic to your side or unsympathetic to the opposing side. Going back to the most extreme examples in segregated American history, it was infamous for having all white juries for black defendants, and that's kind of where the case law was developed as to what qualifies and disqualifies potential jurors.
Sure. And one of the most famous trials ever, the O.J. Simpson trial, the first time around, and how they picked the jury pool and how that all went.
Yeah, it was in the Idaho murders. This was a big issue, because there was so much media coverage of the case. The defense argued that they couldn't possibly get an untainted jury pool, and I don't recall the outcome of that, but it's certainly a viable argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've not had any real famous ones here in Richland Center. We did have one this past summer. It was a jury trial for a possible homicide.
Yep. And I imagine that the DA, the ADA would have looked into various aspects of the potential jurors. I don't want to get into anything that's not public record or anything like that, but certainly that would be something that you'd want to evaluate in the course of preparing your arguments, is making a determination of what sorts of things you would want to see. It is rare that an individual facing involuntary commitment actually takes the matter to jury trial, but it is something that's available to them. And so, for example, if someone were to do that for perhaps something drug-related or something like that, I would look for individuals who I believe would be less sympathetic to somebody who suffers from addiction, as an example of what I would look for in jury selection.
Concerning the city of Richland Center, Michael, we've had word lately about Cobblestone hotels coming in. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so the city approved a development agreement with Cobblestone Hotels. They went through a whole process and an RFP, request for proposal process. We had 2 respondents. City Council, had opportunities to see presentations by both hotel chains, and ended up going forward with Cobblestone. And so we're in, finalizing the details of those negotiations, but they've been offered, public incentive. There's the sale of the property, if I recall correctly, at a reduced price, but overall, the decisions that the council has to make in those situations are whether or not the anticipated total benefit to the city outweighs the immediate financial benefit that might be reflected if, so the land was purchased for $650,000. If we're going to sell it for anything less than that, then we need to be able to articulate why it is to the city's benefit to be able to do that. That's actually not just a thing that I like to do to justify me getting to talk more. It's the application of what's known as the public purpose doctrine. And so it's one of those things that it's not spelled out in law anywhere, but it is a recognized constitutional principle that public assets are to be used for public benefit. And so if you are going to sell property for less than fair market value as a governmental entity to something that is not another governmental entity, you need to be able to articulate why that is to the public's benefit. And so for the hotel, we're talking the increase in room tax, we already have a strong tourism draw, and this will help, give people places to stay. And so we'll have not only the initial tourism dollars from the people who actually come in and stay at the hotel, but then they go home, spread the word about, oh, hey, I found this great little place tucked away in the Driftless, and hopefully get more visitors to this area. And so those are the things that the council has to contemplate. And sometimes I'll be called upon to advise as to whether or not we meet that burden. But oftentimes it's pretty self-explanatory.
So you're called upon if somebody makes a proposal, and then, if it's accepted, then you're called upon to kind of be in a part of the negotiations and everything as well?
Yeah. I would say the numbers I'm less so involved in. That's more economic development and the city administrator. But once terms are reached, in order to put that into the proper language and ensure the city's interests are protected, I'm called upon either to draft development agreements or review development agreements. Sometimes the developer will propose their own contract with the city, and other times I get to draft it up. And for places, for those kinds of agreements, I'll look to ensure that there's performance guarantees. So you have to have this benchmark met by this time, otherwise there's this penalty. A good example would be Panorama. The initial developers agreement prior to my tenure as city attorney did not contain any performance guarantees. The updated agreement does contain performance guarantees, and one of those is, and I won't go into too much detail, but essentially every day that there is not two more apartment buildings standing in the Panorama Estates development, the developer is losing money. And that was something that was built and baked into the actual developer agreement. Now, there are potentially additional remedies available to the city if there's, continuing concerns there. But even just now, every second that's ticking by, there's dollars that are coming off the table.
Really? So, and there's not been any progress? I have not been out there lately, but groundbreaking or anything like that?
So the most recent update given was in a closed session item, so I'm not going to share anything additional on that front.
Okay. But I know the deadline was earlier this year, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, for them to start. What about the campus property? That's a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah, so the campus property, the school district has made an offer to purchase Melville Hall and the gym for $1. That would not need to meet the public purpose doctrine because it's another governmental entity. And I believe that the board was favorable to that because one of the stated desires for them was to keep the property in service of the community. And if it could serve an educational purpose, even better. Well, you sell it to the school district, it's hard to articulate a better educational purpose than that. For the remainder of the property, I know bids had been solicited for what it would cost to demolish the rest of the property. I want to be clear, and this was said prior to, but it can sometimes be easy to lose the details of it. That is simply to obtain the costs. It is not necessarily a commitment to the demolition. So if we did have a party come in and say, no, I want you to sell me those buildings exactly as they are because I restore classic buildings, or I need to teach someone to, then that would certainly be something that the county is considering. Overall, though, they have contracted with SEH, which is a consulting firm, and they're going to develop marketing materials, for lack of a better term, to send out to developers and say, hey, we've got this great parcel. What sorts of things might you be able to do with that? I know that housing is always a concern, so I think that would be a proposal that we would look towards favorably. but at this point, it's just costing the county money to have them sit empty. So I think they'd give a serious look at any proposal that was offered.
And housing at Story Field recently in the news as well. That's proceeding. It sounds like they're moving forward with that project as well.
Yep. So the council has approved the development agreement with the developer there. So we'll just a couple steps until we can finalize the sale of the property, and then I can't speak for the developer. I know it's getting kind of late in the season to start building, but similarly, I would say, even if it's not built into an agreement necessarily, once you own a parcel of property like that, if you're not, if you don't have the anticipated residences that you plan on renting out built, then it's just costing you money. So I would anticipate that the builder and the developer are going to be looking to get those up pretty quickly.
In the city, I know there have been some demolition bids as well lately.
Yeah, so one change that I have been able to devote my efforts to is better application of enforcement. So we have, code of ordinances. A lot of the things that people are annoyed by and complain about are legitimately violations of ordinances, but it's a matter of being able to devote the personnel to enforcing those ordinances. So one of the things that we changed recently, according to our ordinances, only city police officers were able to issue citations previously. The police officers and I think the mayor. And so what we've done is we've changed it so that the city administrator, the office of the city attorney, various department heads can actually issue citations as well. So if there's a vehicle parked in the street that shouldn't be, that could potentially be a public works citation because it impacts the streets. And so that would be something that the director of public works could issue a citation for. We're still working out the logistics of it. There's an electronic program run by the court system that generates what's called uniform citations, and law enforcement is the only one with access to that. So we're trying to figure out if other parties can gain access to it, or whether or not we need to kind of channel those efforts through the police department. But the benefit is that we now have a larger pool of personnel who are capable of initiating enforcement actions. One of the results of that has been we've been able to address some of the blighted properties around the city. And so there are at least two that I can think of off the top of my head where we have gone through the full process to obtain legal authority to raise the building. That's a personal pet peeve because raise, homonyms. Raise in this context means demolish. And so in one, there's still conversations ongoing with the property owner, and they are trying to get together what they can to try and improve the condition of the building. But ultimately, at this point, we've done all we need to do. We could go in tomorrow with a bulldozer and knock it down.
We appreciate you coming on the program because I think, Michael, transparency is very good. A lot of times people think there's something sinister going on all the time, and it's nice to kind of shed a little light on it.
Yeah, I feel like a Scooby-Doo villain sometimes. I'm old man Wendell's trying to steal the hidden gold in the farm.
Would have made it if it wasn't for those meddling kids.
Right, exactly. So, right. And that's not what I'm about. Again, the nature of my profession requires that I keep information confidential. The attorney-client privilege belongs to the client. So only the client can tell me, hey, yeah, you can talk about this. So I have to be very careful that I only discuss matters that are already a matter of public record or that are just general legal principles. But at the same time, again, I think, people hearing me outside of the context of my professional duties, my official duties, is to everyone's benefit. I certainly have a pool of knowledge that, not a lot of people do have. We are blessed with a number of attorneys in this community, beyond what I think some people might expect for a community of this size. But at the same time, just generally putting myself out there. I'm something of a homebody, so I don't get out into the community as often as I should like. But I try to be open and approachable, and then just as a matter of personal interest, I am a open government advocate. Certain things have to be discussed in closed session or behind closed doors, but know that when I'm advising these bodies, I am trying to limit that as much as I possibly can.
Well, you're welcome anytime. We'll try to have you back on a more regular basis.
I think that'd be wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Attorney Michael Wendell joining us here on WRCO's Morning Show.